Hi, and welcome to Be Your Best podcast. I'm Gilman Hanson, your host. I'm a brand strategist and executive creative director for companies and organizations around the world for over 25 years, helping them discover, create, and design brands. A year ago, I took all that I've learned about branding and applied it to people like you and me and created Design Personal Brand Training for individuals and teams, where people can learn about designing a strong personal brand and how to apply it and making a difference for themselves and others. Recently, we started Be Your Best podcast to chat with others who have created successes with their personal brand for both work and play. So let's get started by considering, what does it mean to be our best personal brand? And how can we learn to be our best? How are we perceived? Can we manage what others think of us? Is it just circumstances, or can we play an active role in being a strong personal brand? Today, we are happy and excited to be talking with Uday Dandavate, design activist, ethnographer, and CEO of Sonic Rim, a San Francisco-based design research company specializing in co-creation. In his professional capacity, as well as through blogging, teaching, speaking, and facilitating, Uday provokes fresh perspectives that help to humanize technologies and democratize design. Recently, Uday has published a book of poems titled Window for a Home Without Walls, Life, Imagination, Design, in which he weaves descriptive imagery and poetry together to bring the reader on the journey of his personal awakening. Uday's mission is to cultivate curiosity, compassion, and creativity, and also to ultimately spread love. Uday's ethos is, I'm open, curious, and fearless in exploring what life has to offer. His brand promise is, I will help expand your consciousness, provoke your imagination, and create a sense of purpose to explore the unexplored and make impossible seem possible. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Uday for a while as a friend, designer, and as an inspiration. I've been touched by his empathy, ways of co-creating, and inspiring others.
Thank you very much. It was great. It has been a great journey together.
Yes, it has already. So I'm really excited about today because I'm sure we'll go out to the universe and back with no problems.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's just start by, can you just share with us a little bit about how you others. So Dave, welcome. Glad you
Thank
could join
you.
us on Be Your Best.
Thank you very much. It was great. It has been a great journey together.
Yes, it has already. So I'm really excited about today because I'm sure we'll go out to the universe and back with no problems.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's just start by, can you just share with us a little bit about how you came to be who you are today and how you began your work?
Wonderful. I think I have been looking back at it more so during the COVID time,
Mm.
which has given me time for reflection. So I divide my life into three parts: the professional life. One, when I came out of design school, I was a designer, and my mission was inspired by the mission of Bauhaus to uh, humanize, to bring art to play on the ugliness that industrial revolution had created. I graduated in 1981. I was in design school between 75 and 81. I practiced, so my first phase of design life was designer. The second phase was when I came to the US and studied design research, became an ethnographer, and started studying people's lives. their dreams, their imagination. And in that process, I became a storyteller. Stories that inspire imagination became my job. And during COVID era, we just the beginning of the future, just the tip of the iceberg. I had time to absorb everything that I had learned in my life, and it triggered poetry in me. I have never tried poetry. Uh, in fact, long back, my daughter told me never to try writing poetry because I really wrote a bad poem for her when she was 5 years old. But this just came out one day when I was on a mountain and I saw a feather flying past me and I tried to catch it, it went away. And that night at 3 o'clock, I wrote a poem and they just coming out of me every night over a period of 8 months. And I realized that my new purpose is to inspire imagination through poetic creations, creations that are not seen as my own, but as eternal expressions of universal curiosities and sensitivities that live beyond my thoughts. They are not prescriptive, they are evocative. They frame a perspective on life inside and life outside. And that's why I think my designerly way of understanding and absorbing the universe around me and inside me took form of poetry. And I'm receiving an amazing reaction from people that people take those poems, make it their own, and translate it into music, um, therapy, stories, art, whatever. And I think that's the power of real true design is design must provoke imagination of everyday people. And that's where I am today.
So, provoking imagination, right? So, in that context, um, there, at least for me, just talking, the imagination is great, but it needs a rudder.
Mhm.
It needs to have a foundation of intention, or else it can go anywhere. So,
Absolutely.
and what I'm hearing from you, if I may be so bold, is that there's a certain intention you have that that sort of makes those the poetry, which by the way I've read and you know that and I loved it. That there's an intention, there's like a purpose for for people to find or to discover in your poetry,
Hmm.
and that was almost reflected back to me a little bit.
Absolutely. In fact, I think what I'm learning through this process of externalizing poetry is that what we call purpose, which drives our actions, is actually a mandate of nature.
Mm.
Nature created us to be a part of an ecosystem, and it ingrained certain rules in us for peaceful coexistence, a harmonious coexistence. And when we understand and follow those rules of harmony and growth and discovery, we find more joy out of engaging with the other beings in that universe. And finding that path through the discovery of those rules and engagement with that harmonious movement through the universe is our purpose.
Well stated. Um, I find that it's something to practice every day and actually in every moment, really, particularly when I'm with others, is is that idea of of wanting to have the best outcome possible
Hmm.
in sharing and hoping with others. Um, so you were just talking a little bit about how one day you just woke up and said, "Okay, I'm going to write poetry." So, and before that, you really you weren't a poet at all, were you?
Never. Tried only once.
That's well, sounds like the universe is calling.
Absolutely. In fact, one of my teachers, he was my teacher in the foundation year of design in 1975. Today, he's a recluse. He lives alone with his wife. I sent my manuscript to him. He read it, and then we got on a call, and he said it would reminded him of a poem, which was originally in Urdu. But the essence of that poem is that there was this bud in a forest that was growing alone in darkness,
Mm.
through light and darkness. And one day, uh, someone who could appreciate that flower passed by. And in that very moment, the bud was turning into a flower. And it just happened that this maven looked at the flower, and as his eyes fell on the flower, he could appreciate it. And he said, "What happened to you was that this bud was growing inside of you through your life experiences. And your attention happened to fall the very moment it was ready to bloom. And you captured it in poetry." So he recalled that poem to describe why this happened. And I do understand that in a way that the sensitivities that we develop as designers in design training do nurture in us the ability to sense and appreciate the life around us, the finer things of life around us, and to follow certain principles of authenticity. And through that kind of curiosity, when we look at the world, mundane things of life appear to have a design of their own, and they serve as inspiration to create something beautiful, such as a poem.
Well, it's interesting when you're talking about design. I actually remember Foundation. I think it was 1974, 5. So at RISD, I went to Rhode Island School of Design, and I remember everything was possible in Foundation.
Mhm.
You remember that? Like you could just, it wasn't, there was very little restrictions. It was very creative, and really my best times, my best times.
Absolutely.
And
In fact, the same teacher has given a preface to my book. You must have seen it. His name is Professor Mohan Bhandari, and that's the preface. It's
oh,
in
there,
the
yeah,
first few
okay.
pages of my book. And his words I remember on the first day of Foundation in Design. He said, "From your job during the next 1 year is to unlearn everything you have learned in school and to reclaim your childlike curiosity."
Wow. That's beautiful. One thing about design school, I remember my senior year, I went for my final crit to with a really a mountain of a creative guy, designer, artist named Mahler Ryder, and he was. I always just totally, uh, you know how it is. You think these people are like gods for you when you're a student, and he looked at my work and he says, um, uh, so he said something to the effect that, okay, so you're much bigger than this, and you should just go out and explore and keep exploring and find and keep moving. He said, because this is just a beginning of something. And it was so true. It's so true. And hearing, going back full circle with the reason you wrote those poems is exactly like that. Like there was something better or newer. The universe is waiting for you.
And there is so much to discover in things that are right in front of you.
Yeah.
You don't have to go looking for them with intention. You just have to open your mind and be curious, and you can be flooded with lifelong inspiration.
Yeah. That's that's what it's all about. There's sort of two parts of our brain or our thoughts. There's sort of the positive and the negative, right? And the more you you're in the moment, the positive seems to be right there. The opening seems to be right there. And I know for me, it's a little bit of an exercise sometimes because I feel stuck. Uh, I did this once, and then I read one of the poems. Thank you. And I opened up. I opened up right there. I let go. I opened up. I was, oh yeah, everything's fine. Everything's beautiful. You know, just was more energized. And you were doing a service for me.
Thank you. I i meant to, in fact, this is what I've discovered through this COVID time.
Mm,
Number one, I feel very lucky and privileged that my hardships are nothing compared to the pain and suffering of so many people around the world.
mm,
I still have a roof over my head. I get food 2 times a day, and I have the luxury of social distancing and washing my hands. Many people don't have that. So I should take what I consider as my pain, anxiety, suffering, vulnerability, embrace it, and then grow from it. Not see it as something that's bad, but see it as something that feels like a state from which I need to grow.
mm. I think so many great seers throughout history have told us that same thing that, you know, behind every problem is a better solution. You just have to sort of discover it, look at it. Sometimes even just, well, I know this is true, but just focusing can change everything, can change the atoms, can change the molecules just by focusing. And I think the focusing on making things better with compassion is such a nice way to be. And
Absolutely.
for me, COVID's been opening that up to me. Uh, just like the poems you've been, you you shared is, I think there's a better way for us all to be, and perhaps there's an underlying hope or different way of looking at things through all this COVID business.
So there's something interesting that I have learned. And this is like I've been thinking about it this last week. Uh, in my book and in my various conversations around the book, I've been talking about my purpose is to create curiosity, compassion, and creativity. But the word compassion is uh, driving me in a new direction in design,
Mm,
because almost 25, 27 years ago, I wrote an article on user empathy in design, and empathy being the foundation of all design that it ought to be. And lately, I'm beginning to feel that compassion is something that's even bigger than empathy. Because empathy is something where you put yourself in somebody else's shoes and feel what they feel and design for them. Whereas compassion is you feel for them, but there is still a distance. And I have learned through these years of designing with empathy that sometimes it's important to maintain a little distance and not burn yourself out with the emotions of the person you're designing for.
Mm.
I think being empathic can be painful. I'm sure a lot of medical workers are feeling that right now. Whereas being compassionate can protect you from the first hand experience of empathy. And so that's going to be my like compassion is more activated feeling for acting on understanding other people's feelings while yet maintaining a distance and not letting it be affect you inside. And I don't know how it grows into a practice for me, but I'm beginning to learn that that's going to be a new seed that I'm going to uh, germinate for a few months and see what grows out of it.
I um I really like what you said there because I always felt uh, empathy, awesome, right? Good. But what about the heart? What about the feeling of it all?
Hmm.
And I sort of felt that when you were saying that about compassion.
Hmm.
Compassion's a bigger way of improving things. Can you imagine if we were all building cars and everything through compassion? It's
I know.
great. I love what you just said. It's a it's a it's awesome, and I think
In fact, I'm glad that you brought up a car because I've been doing a lot of work with automotive industry,
mm,
and I can see clearly where technology is leading all the artifacts of the world today, be it wristwatches, phones, televisions, cars, homes, everything is becoming intelligent, and then everything is becoming artificially intelligent, and everything is developing its own thinking. And I have concerns about it. I have concerns about the enthusiasm engineers have for constructing intelligence without consideration to the soul. I think we need to be very mindful when we create artificial intelligence to build a future where people still are connected to their soul.
yeah, there's a
I kind of feel even things like what's happening on social media, it seems to be bringing out the ideas that are people would be shy to express face to face. People are meaner on social media. People express hate more naturally on social media. People connive, they allow themselves to be manipulated, and there is a larger design. We saw in that Cambridge technology thing that happened during the last elections that we are building an edifice where we allow our soul to be controlled by somebody else. And I want to make sure more and more that be it my phone or be it my watch or be it my car, we still allow people to preserve their soul.
yeah. That
Human interactions and relationships should not be defined by technology.
it's so funny you say that because right here I have a phone And while you're talking, it pings, the screens come up saying new messages. And, it's easy to think that we're almost like more, we're attached to our phones and our technology. But I know, and everybody knows, we're still just primates.
Yes.
Primates. We just have a little bigger forehead than the chimpanzees, though we're 96% the same DNA. And I think somehow these devices, all these gadgets, cars, they remove us from the fact that we're animals on planet Earth. And there's a lot of us too right now, a little too many of us maybe, and we're ravaging the planet, the environment, in ways that are really propelled by and don't take this wrong. I'm not saying it in a bad way, but in a capitalist system where the whole world's run on the capital markets, and so much of that is is employment, is quote progress, going to the moon. All these things are driven, and yet we have to come back. We forget that, look, we're here for like 80, 90 years. Then we go back to the earth. That's it. Just like all the other animals, just like all the other plants, we get recycled. We become new, we become whatever, an eggplant next time. I don't know. But the point is that so much of technology, like you said, removes us from that humanness that we truly are.
I'll give you a perfect example of that. For the past 9 months, 10 months, we have been communicating like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Screens, right? Right.
I have probably talked to more people, done more things online than ever before, talked to more people around the world, yet. And I'm also hearing from my friends who are in the corporate world that they're learning that you can get things done quicker without having to travel. A friend of mine who works for a pharma company, he would go to Switzerland for a day and a half meeting and fly back. And he said, I don't think that's ever going to happen again. We realized that we can achieve the same things, similar things in a day and a half. So I have a feeling that on one hand, we are discovering the functional productivity of technology in this era of lockdown, but the cumulative effect I feel in my heart, I'm engulfed with melancholy.
Mm.
My residual feeling at the end of these 10 months is not happiness. I'm feeling sadness. And when I express that to my wife, she says, I know that you are a person who likes to go out and meet people,
Mm.
who likes to hug people, who likes to talk to people. You get your energy from other people's energy. And you've not traveled in last 10 months, not got out and met face to face with people. That's why you're feeling this. So I can feel that there is something about being in the real world with each other, sharing the joys, sharing the stories in the real world as opposed to these flat screens. That is meant to be. And I hope we don't lose out on that. And I hope we don't construct a whole world that is hidden behind the digital screen, that extracts that soulfulness that we have in us that can only be tapped into if we can touch each other.
Yeah. It's like as simple as pretty much once a day, I go outside. I go outside and smell the air, trees. I live near a forest, go for a walk, and it brings me back to something more primal. Like I'm able to feel I'm a part of nature than a screen. where I spend 8 hours a day looking at
Mhm.
screens. And I think that it's so important, particularly now with COVID, that some way, and I know this is hard for a lot of people because of responsibilities and where they live and food and everything else. But
Mhm.
like you said, just spend a few moments just getting in touch with the bigger picture, the universe we live in, the earth we live on, and for me that's really important.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you one of the questions I ask everybody. Now, I'm curious. Um, who would you say are your greatest influencers, like your mentors, to make you become who you
In
are?
life or in profession?
Well, since we're talking about life, let's go to life.
Okay, so life, I would say my parents, number one. Um, and that's what I've dedicated my book to them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to my mother who taught me not to fear. I think that's like she's given me a lot, but I think she consciously cultivated in me, she trained me not to fear anything. And my dad, amongst everything that I've learned from him, is to be an optimist, always to look at the brighter side of things, things that are possible when everything seems impossible. So that was the beginning. I would say a lot of people have influenced my life, but I would say most of the time, two or three things that have influenced me. People with two or three kind of capabilities: message of social justice from a variety of people, engaging in creative activities from a variety of people, and uh, writing, reading, and storytelling from a few people. So these are the three kinds of things that have uh, multiple people have influenced me throughout. As I grew up, um, then I would say when I was a designer all in the first part of my professional career. When I came to the graduate school, I would say one person who really inculcated in me the spirit of participatory design was Dr. Liz Sanders, who was on my graduate committee. She's a Norwegian sociologist. She has a PhD in psychology with anthropology as minor. So I worked with her. So she was one. The professor who I told you about, who was my foundation professor, I would definitely say he was one of the guys who sowed the seeds of me being open and curious to the environment around me. And then there are many others in life: Gandhi, Buddha, two people, Nelson Mandela, and King Jr., amongst them, are some of the people who have influenced me.
And what what in your eyes, which are I find really provocative in the stories you're saying, what are the key elements of a strong personal brand that empowers you?
If I have to put it in one word: authenticity.
Really?
Yes. In fact, there was one professor of mine when I was at NID in Ahmedabad, in my first design school. He was a student of Misha Black at Royal College of Arts, London. And he would say one of his principles of design is never compromise on the integrity of design, be authentic in the use of materials and processes. Do not try to be in something that is not. And that just stayed with me, not as a principal theme of design, but as I lived through life, authenticity acquired new meaning. And today, in the post COVID world, when I look back, when I look at my own closet, look at my own possessions, look at the things that I work without, I can do without, I realize the rest of my life needs to be carved around, and I need to focus on helping others look at joy of life with authenticity. Take out all the things that are so pretentious in our life. There is so much more mindful, responsible, sustainable use of resources that we can do to create a life that is more joyful. So I would say my brand is to approach the world with the authenticity, create the world with authenticity, and learn with curiosity.
And have fun too, right?
Fun. I think that at the heart of everything has to be play.
Right. I remember spending time with you at the DMI conference in Munich, and it seemed like we had a lot of fun.
Oh yeah,
We always
absolutely.
had fun. So I think that definitely is one of your MO is fun and enjoying people.
Yeah, yeah, because that's one of our like uh, most innate human skills is to play.
Mm. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's through play that we learn and grow, and play is fun. When we make learning work, it becomes boring and we degenerate. But if learning is play, we absorb and grow, we engage and grow.
I somehow I'm perhaps for whatever reason, it took me a long time to discover that it's all about play, fun, enjoying, and once I uh, sort of started capturing that, everything got so much better. Uh, not only was I more clear, productive, but I was also just enjoying myself so much more.
I'll tell you something very funny. Somebody in my own company has said this to me, and other people outside have said this to me, is that for me, I like to make everything fun for my clients, for the participants of my study, or for people in my company. And they ask, why does it always have to be fun? And there are people whose approach is to approach life with seriousness and with profoundness and with systemacity and with some very serious prescription for a world to follow the right path. And be my guest. That's fine. I don't deny them their joy of being in that path. But I think that's what my design field has done for me, is that for me, play is important. And I think evolving through curiosity, playful tinkering, and discovery is the essence of design.
I, um, it has been said that, right? And I think more and more that those qualities you're just talking about, I've learned to really appreciate. And the book, by the way, does a lot of that. The book, I almost sometimes I'm seeing your eyes looking at things through those type of feelings, the sensitivity, the joy, and some of those poems are you're challenging the norm, the contradiction of quote seriousness because of a butterfly or flowers in front of you or the ocean. And I really feel like right now your book is so timely, if I may be so honest. Um, and it's a, I feel like it's something that more people would really enjoy in this time of COVID.
Yeah, in fact, I honestly, you know, one reason why this book doesn't have a title or an author name in the front page, or like all the marketing quotes on the backside, it only has it in the spine,
Mm,
name and the author, is because I want anyone who owns it and keeps it on their desk to feel it's like their own window to their own world.
mm,
I don't want the typography to interfere with their own lens. So when you keep it in front of you, you don't see the spine, but when you keep it in the shelf, you see just enough information to pull it out. So when it's in the shelf, it doesn't have any impact, but when it sits next to you, it's supposed to say, this is my personal journal of reflection. And just like there is a song that you live with, grow with, a poem that you live with, grow with, that you don't care who wrote it, but its tune, its essence, its meaning is what resonates with you. I want these are the words that have flown through me, either as a butterfly or as a feather or as a rock or whatever that might metaphor might be. I want that to flow on because it belongs to all of us.
mm.
It's a it's an experience of collective consciousness that brings sanity and connectedness, and it brings us, this is a rule book of nature of how to get along and grow together. This is not something I created.
Uh, um, so we're sort of reaching our closer now. Um, at the end of this, by the way, incredible conversation. Thank you. Um, so where would people, the name of the book is Window for a Home Without Walls.
Mhm.
And where's the best way to find the book? Where can people go and find your book?
Amazon.com. And then if you're in any other country, your local Amazon, and it's available both in Kindle and paperback. I encourage people to get paperback because that's the real world experience of holding a book, keeping it under your pillow and grabbing it whenever you need it.
All right, I have to be honest, it's on my phone.
Okay.
So I did have but I had a very visceral feelings when I was reading the book. But you're
So you
right.
don't have a paperback?
No, I downloaded it on the
No,
phone.
so I will send it to you. Please send me your address. I will send one to you. But I do have to say one thing about my next project, because without that, this conversation cannot end. Is uh, I sent my book to a, a friend of mine, a wife of a friend of mine, and she does creative projects for children. And I've
Mm,
written a blog about it.
yeah.
And she wrote back saying, after reading your book, I'm inspired to write poems for children. And her reaction prompted me to write a book of poems for children on the same theme. And overnight, I wrote 12 poems, then wrote two more. And now I'm working on a similar book for children between the age of 8 to 13. My mission to give design back to people is now going to the children now. And I hope that it creates a conversation between parents and children to look at these rules of nature that help us to expand our awareness, consciousness, and creativity.
That's wonderful. That's incredible. I have one more question
Yes.
because I've been looking at it the whole time. We've been talking with your back screen. The tree, the significance of the tree. Is that a special tree in your life, or is that it's beautiful, but the tree is part of your cover, the main part of your cover?
So my book was designed by Professor Mukesh Patel of Arizona State University Department of Design. Um, he asked me what was the ethos of my creation, and we had a long conversation. Then he asked me what kind of a, a feeling you want to communicate through the cover. So I remember I said there are two, three things come to my mind. I want um, uh, Andy Warhol in it. I also want a little bit of Salvador Dali in it, and my own metaphor of life is tree. So I kind of say that these different images come to my mind, and something that combines the essence of all these three things would um, be the feel of my cover. So he went out and looked for this. He created this. And of course, this is in sepia. The actual book is in full color. Chatting with you is always so much fun. And you have a knack of pulling out some things that are like deeply entrenched but don't surface normally.
Oh, well, good.
And
Thank
I'm very sure that when you help others create their own personal brand, you pick on things that they've never thought were their essence.
Well, it's, everyone's a journey, and it's really fun. It's a total pleasure I feel like I'm a guide, and I guide you for people on their journey to discover their best personal brand, because um, it's being about your best and discovering of that is so much fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like doing these podcasts. It's the same thing. It's really a pleasure to watch people open up and express their best parts. So anyway, I want to thank you so much